Oh, good.
I'm sorry. I get the honor of welcoming you all. I'm Carol Minkiti. I know it's a job that my husband would love to have done, and his spirit is with us tonight in this wonderful place. And we welcome two really wonderful poets from Vermont, a place which he really loved very much. In fact, our family has a place in Vermont that he calls the Gathering Place. So welcome. You've come a long way, and I hope you're safe getting home. So thank you for being here. And welcome to the people. There's many people on Zoom that will be watching tonight too. So welcome to you. This is a little camera hit.
Jump in.
Yes, sir.
All right. Oh, okay.
So you can do it from here. Okay, come up. Okay, whatever you say. Hello, my name is Tiara. I will just be doing the introductions tonight. First off, it is my pleasure to introduce Ralph Culver. He is a poet with widespread roots, born in Champaign, Illinois, raised in Pittsburgh, stints in New York and school in North Carolina, and the majority of time, though, has been in Vermont, which is where he currently lives. He is a past grantee in poetry of the Vermont Arts Council and multiple nominee for the Pushcart Prize. After two successful chapbooks, the newest addition to his repertoire of work is his recently published full-length collection entitled Passable Man. This collection is rich with rhythms humming from multiple sources, from nature, from the soul, and the ever-consuming present. These poems are imbued with a sense of quiet urgency that can be felt throughout the body. And without any further ado, Ralph Culver.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. And I want to thank you all for coming tonight, staring down the nor'easter in the face. James, thank you for arranging this. It's really wonderful to be here in this cathedral of world poetry. I'm going to start by reading a poem by someone else, which is what I traditionally do when I read. And that gives me, I read a poem by Seamus Heaney, and that gives me a chance to tell my only good Grolier bookshop story that's probably worth retelling. I was in this store. It might have actually been the first time that I was in this store. It was probably like in the late 1980s. And I was just browsing, hanging out, being sort of blown away by all the wonderful stuff. And suddenly the door opens and in rolls Seamus Heaney. And of course, he was instantly recognizable to me. And he went immediately over to the register and started talking to whoever the proprietor, whoever at the time. Again, this is like 35 years ago or something like that. And so I was kind of like inching closer just to hear what Heaney was talking about. And now I've been in a few pubs in my day, and I've heard a few patrons talking with the proprietor about their bar tab. And it was a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure that I remember pretty clearly that he was talking about his tab here at the Grolier. So I'm going to start with a poem by Seamus Heaney. This is called Digging. You may know it. It's pretty well known, but I think it's good for good poem to start the reading off with. Digging by Seamus Heaney. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests, snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground. My father digging. I look down till his straining rump among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. The coarse boot Nestled on the lug, the shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. By God, the old man could handle a spade, just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Toner's bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle, corked sloppily with paper. He straightened up to drink it, then fell to right away, nicking and slicing, neatly heaving sods over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf, digging. The cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge through living roots awaken in my head. But I've no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests. I'll dig with it. This poem, the last year or two, I've been reading a lot of Chinese poetry and translating some, and I have fallen in love with Li Bai, who in the West is also known as Li Bo and Li Po. He predates Shakespeare by several centuries, and he's considered an immortal in poetry, and in China also, they're careful to point out that he's an immortal where wine is concerned as well. He liked to jug. This is called Lamentation of Another Evening Wasted, after Li Bai. The wine jug has been filled and emptied, filled and emptied. My lips alone have kissed its wide, wet mouth. Leaves of torn and crumpled paper scattered about the chamber, covering my feet. An entire night of raising a cup to beg the moon's blessings, hands blackened with ink. Stain of autumn moonlight on my writing desk, stain of forsaken verses on my fingers, a night of drunken lines mourning my drunken days. One page worth saving. If I thought I could make it back to my room, I would drag my body down to the banks of the Yangtze in the awakening dawn and let this single sheet set sail on its waters under the branches of the red maples. My new book, A Passable Man, which is just out from MadHat Press, it's divided into sections where within each section, the poems are more or less thematically arranged. And there's a bit of a chronological sort of order to it too. The first section starts with poems about childhood and adolescence. This is called Boy at the Plate, and it's dedicated to my children and my parents. Boy at the plate. Spread, the boy's legs are unsteady as tent poles in a squall. It is useless to tell him I know what this is, waiting on someone who seems as near as the end of his reach to give him his chance at shame. That he hardly believes it is himself. I heard that voice in my head so many times it became a weapon, the only weapon I had. It is useless to tell him the same voice splits from the throat of the field mouse, rearing up to teeth as long as its own forelegs. Useless and wrong. For now, the boy must believe he stands in the mouth of the first fear birthed in the world. Later, in time, perhaps while watching his own and shaken by the glory of it that it is, he will see for himself the common fear, the common love he fell out of, now into, and watch and love and be thankful. Fill up. Lulled, he sits, a nothing in the vast back seat, amid the drumming of the gasoline, the stunned smell of worn felt and Marlboros. Two heedless growths perch on their collared stems, murmur the day and will not turn. Between them, the air bends out above the hood the way a snake sends itself across the surface of a lake. He studies his debased reflection in the chrome plate of an ashtray mounted damaged at the center of his parents' seat before him. Golf. He slowly leans into that face. It swells, narrows, and runs down the cracked silver. One voice enlarges, saying, "Watch it, honey, or you're going to be replaced." A laugh, a cough. They are always almost there. Where are they taking him? How could I, waiting for whatever was to happen, how could I not see where they were taking him? This poem's called Dancing Down Broadway with My Bottle of Brandy. It's dedicated to my friend Danny Seidenberg for moving sort of into post-adolescence, early 20s craziness at this stage of the book. Dancing Down Broadway with My Bottle of Brandy for Danny Seidenberg. 1, sober, you continued to be repulsive. Another, she in green, senses the need you sense and pivots, pursuing an immediate elsewhere. Turns one eye to the topmost of two pulses wed at her wrist, confirms she's history from either approach. What it is, it's, you think, too obvious. Things tend to support this conclusion in spite of your demand for little, if not nothing, from any. Then her buttressed foot, discerned at the logical end of a last glance, falls without thought just beyond the potential glee of a fresh dog pile that squats dead center in a streetlight's wisdom. You think of vaudeville and several Eastern religions. You think life is basically stupid. You go home with his weights, fat with retreat, and break out the last bottle. 2. You skiffle on the rain-spat paving, swing the amber dancing club about your head, a warning and a benediction. Dread confines. You've finished with it. Now you wing your way through these convenient double doors, approach the bench. Two close-clung counselors take brief stock of their virtues. Compromise is obviously ordered. His and hers, their dewy steins announce. McNally's eyes appraise your burden. His fat finger points at your specific self. He smiles. The joint's just closed, he says, as far as you're concerned. The chatter dims. If nothing else, you've learned when you're not wanted. Your teeth by the girl's feet, you envisage a matched set of pearls broken and scattered in some jugroom fray. Your company in hand, you turn away. That's that. Back in the street, the rain. Back in the street, the rain dies quietly. An old pain sparks. Two men waiting for a bus. A drunk snores in his swollen clothes. The obvious again, speaking, that rough, unquiet diamond. And of the other, of love, there is never, never enough. The dress. A narrow dirt road in a coastal town finds a man lying down beneath a scrub tree by the shoulder, near enough to the sea to hear its plunge and plow. The ground is hard. The man arches his back a bit and settles. Across his face and chest rests the shadow of the tree. It trembles barely, and the man, doing his best to create a more forgiving place, tries to imagine the shade in the scrub tree as something else. But the shade slipping over him lightly becomes a black dress the tree might just have stepped free of, and the breath of the sea at his ear as a lover's sleep. And then there is no helping it. The earth is too hard. Though he can't move quite yet, the man is walking in himself, already down this road that leaves him now under the folds of the dress. Her heart mourning for him. The roses have used up their time on earth. Well, for now. In 5 months, spring will have its say. But today, the snow has changed everything, hiding despair and promise equally. The light, increasing from the east, frames her at the window as she looks down on the featureless yard beneath its white, obscurant mantle. What to feel, she wonders, that space in her chest non-committal, even though she senses how much the man in the bed behind her loves her. What to feel when what we have is good and still not what we wanted. She understands. She desires a sign, a cardinal alighting on the branch just beneath the sill. Maybe the dog will bark or a rabbit will cross the yard by the trunk of the maple. In the meantime, waiting, she sees just clearly enough that she needn't choose despair or promise one over the other just now. His breathing is even, a constancy. Her own breath fogs the window pane. This poem is called Koan of a Sort. People know what a koan is, right? A koan is a very short verse. It's sort of characterized as like a rap on the forehead to wake you up in Zen Buddhism. Koan of a Sort. The sounds of water as she rises from her bath while I slice bread in the kitchen. How can I still feel sorry for myself? A couple more. This poem is called The Misunderstanding. I did not say you are nothing to me. I said the hummingbird, the anglerfish are not amazed at themselves. I did not say I have forgotten you, but that every day a man finds more things that trouble him. Not you are not beautiful, but that often when I lie in the grass, a lute sings in the earth beneath me. Not I regret, but that I stare at these keys I carry in my pocket and think of the narrow bones I once turned over in the garden. Not I never loved you, but you are all you have. As for the rest, yes, it is as you say, the words are mine, but all the rooms of the world we have lived in close now over the words of others. Earth, keys, man, when will you seek out that lamp, that light under which they were written? And to sort of end this section, field in winter, and you might recognize the line from Tennyson that sneaks in here. Field in winter. I had thought what a poor thing it was to have loved and lost. Yet in some part of me, I am wishing him well, the man in your bed tonight, the care of your happiness now entrusted to him. And the tracks in the snow, they mark both distances, from and to. The new snow will come. What happens then, any child knows. No evidence of our passing. This is called Memento. It's dedicated to Erhard Manka. He was a good friend of mine whose father had died. And it was a difficult time with that. The poem is called Memento for my friend, a carpenter whose father has died. When you are in your car driving the darkening road and the sadness strikes you, when the lost face rises from the shatterings of rain that uncoil a pale longing across your path, when you are eating your cold lunch by the half-finished houses and something leaves you and you take up the handle of the hammer and close your grip on it slowly, slowly. When in a moment, there's the sea change, a draining of blood salt that harrows your eyes to fire and water, and your cupped hands await something that never comes. Remember, do not ever forget that the road you take is taking you under the quavering stars, that the rain is a thing you wear in your hair, like dew crowning the trees in summer, that the houses are patient, the nail is straight, the hands are in no need of waiting, that your eyes are the Father, they are of the world and are not, and their seeing bears you across the world and the water to witness what all is not lost. And I'll finish with a poem called To March, which is a couple of months away, but we still have this nor'easter to go through, but New Englanders will recognize sort of the ambiance of the month, I hope, in this poem. To March. Cutting carrots for soup. I'm distracted by the trees outside the window, their branches making sweeping gestures through pale air half an hour before sundown. Officious, yet somehow disinterested, the somber limbs directing, urging us to move more quickly past the scene of some disaster or other and go about our business. And I think, that's March, isn't it? They stand, the trees, above cracked plates of snow that look like a pile of slate shingles just tumbled off a truck and spilled around the trunks in shards. But that's March too, the declining sunlight suddenly flaring up across a glaze of ice that appears without warning at a bend in the road. This unavoidable fact about yourself and the moment. And you realize as you turn the steering wheel smoothly into the skid that you are at ease with the prospect of any possibility. Everything in the bed shifts as you hit dry pavement and then goes cascading. The whole load thunders overboard. But you've stopped. Stopped. Somehow you're on all four tires. And when you climb out of the cab, there is the wind, that storied, oft venerated wind moaning and clawing at your throat, a lover who wants you or wants you dead. Maybe both, probably both, I think, looking across the snow crust, gathering murk as dusk settles in. Winter each day just a bit more distant, each day itself just a bit longer and brighter than the last. and return to the comfortable heft of the knife, the kitchen sweetened by steaming broth and promise. Another seeming catastrophe survived. Thank you very much.
That's it. That's it for him.
Well,
you
what's
want
coming?
Some of the
See what,
young woman.
yeah, let's see what the young woman does.
Thank you again so much, Ralph. That was wonderful. It is my pleasure next to introduce Bianca Stone. With an unmistakable ear for relaying proposed universalities through humor, Bianca Stone's recently released collection of poetry, What is Otherwise Infinite, from Tin House shows how complex the world in and outside of poetry truly can be. With an unarguable genuineness, Stone is able to put history's titans in conjecture with philosophy, religion, myth, psychology, while also being in the same proximity as the personal, the familial, and self-reflective poems. An incarnate of poetic energy, she is also the creative director of the Ruth Stone House in Goshen, Vermont. Established nearly a decade ago, the organization, named after poet Ruth Stone, her grandmother, works to provide poets from all over with writing workshops, a writing retreat, manuscript consultations, in the online literary magazine Iterant, with a podcast hosted by Bianca as well. She lives in Vermont with her husband and fellow poet, Ben Pease, and their daughter, Odette. And Bianca.
Awesome. Thank you, Ralph. It was awesome. I just drove here from Vermont, listening to Carl Jung's Psychology of the Unconscious on tape. Feeling like starting with a God poem. God searches for God. Of my unclear and unimaginable self, I want none of it. There is nothing higher than I, only monks at my feet kissing warts. I have nothing to give but tears, of which one is too much and the whole sea not enough. Do not fathom me here. Do not touch this. Having laid the cosmic egg, who will take my eternal life in their hands? It is said this planet came to be when I was pulled apart. Marcus Aurelius. Sometimes I wake in the night in a headache, my mouth like an iron forge, looking for anything valuable in the debris. I turn on the tiny light clipped to my book. I write things down in the spirit of Marcus Aurelius, who said the finest bottle of wine is nothing but grape juice passing through the liver. No matter the beauty of a frosted glass or a night of big truth-seeking never recalled. The importance of putting something sweet into our mouths, turning it around and around on our tongues, attaching to it our missions, our purpose. In the end, we are all just filters, no more miraculous than the plainest of birds, who up close you can hardly believe, nor as focused as the deer tick. Nothing is given over to, nothing new is lit. So often it is this. I wake up urgent, fatalistic, with the taste of nectar on my bowels. I replay on a loop my one stoic consistency, my middle of the night vow that I will start tomorrow the essential dismantling of how I live. Some days I get up to go for a run, but instead just sit in spandex and write about the fog. Is the fog lifting or the trees rising? Who cares? Nature transfers her blood into the air. We are her trans fat, her lung cancer, her addiction. Some days I get up early to write, but instead clean. The great lie that I'm doing something. The horrible way ketchup keeps still bright. Beer cans lined up on the porch railing. It is the end of summer. The insects are at their biggest. They bang and thrum against the screens, maniacs giving their last hurrah. I creep around like Nancy Drew with my hunch and no real proof. All things feel preordained, repeated. My body is numb, without anticipation. I sit in the lobby of someone else's potential, thinking it is my own. I go about my day, convinced I am immortal. Does life exist independent of its form? What is immortal? And if it is immortal, how is it that it has an incurable disease and wanders around a total aberration, mutant, while the catamount vanishes from the species? Is it that we live at the top of the food chain alone with no link to anything above us, no elegant forfeiture in the mouth of the tiger? Or is our problem that we do not actually live at the top of the food chain and are devoured daily by thought and time, holy and obscene, unmentionable? Time does not go beyond its maiden name. In any way, right now, everything tastes so good. All the male poets' poems, and the dirty, dirty chocolate layer cake. I swallow it with a glass of milk. A crumb crawls down my throat and enters me. The power of Christ compels not I, but the wish to be changed. Everything is challenged by the sudden flame of joy. How uncomfortable we are with our happiness. But darling, you're staggering. Your temple mouth is being forsworn. My sister, crying in the hammock because your lover will not come. The children are screaming and running with blue guns in the air and little cuts on their feet. And you, little mole angel, restless song, smashed idol, bronzed cat head on the hood of a car headed into the ravine, driven by our ancestors' dark awe of the comet. How can someone not become heartbreaking in one sense of the word? Not find they are a stranger in their own household of truly unnameable need. Distracting to me in here because I just want to look at all the like in poetry books have like such small spines, you really got to get in there. But I'm so excited to buy some books. Let's see. This poem's called The Way Mirrors Happen. Going up the stairs of your house with laundry, like one of the washers of the Magdalene asylums for fallen women, you pass the tall, always unclear mirror and glance quickly at yourself, meeting your eyes like a waitress commiserating by sight with the only other waitress at the steakhouse of off-duty men. A whole needlecraft passes between you, a fleeting empathy that hardens and endures. Your job has become a conduit of static electricity, wrinkled tea towel, faded underwear. You are both undercover in the domestic tragedies department, playing housewife. That you are somehow not separate from your reflection cannot fully resolve in your heads, and it is a weird comfort to think one of you will no longer look out after the other has collapsed. Um, oh, just don't know if I can read that poem again. It's so here's a I ended up having like 5 television poems in my book, because that's just what all of us are so involved in. It becomes like, I mean, it's part of the family. But my editor was like, can we have more television poems? And I had one poem that was called The Last Television Poem, because I was like, I can't write any more television poems. So all I did was change that poem to be called Not the Last Television Poem. But secretly it is. You could spend every night with the television. The uneasiness of being alive, it wears you down. So you might sit with the television, your obligatory interview, fatal in its mirrored posture, one musical interlude after another, all the universes of Star Trek you haven't mastered, the unreal, digitally rendered areas of planet Earth you will never enter. You sit down with it like the detective who knows way less than she's letting on, sits across from the cantankerous yet somehow fearless criminal. You'll be there all night bluffing one another. You could spend a lifetime eating dried fruit, and nuts, and wine, like an apostle, resentful of the flock in its huge vision, and not even fight the urge to be given a better story, with all its core crew immortality and moral surrender. You'll accept it, sit down as an equal in its light, sit like a painting that faces a window, try to cancel each other out. It was just Virginia Woolf's birthday the other day, so this is a little, it's not a Virginia Woolf poem, but she's in it. She makes an appearance. Wolves. Well, where are you? Virginia Woolf would begin her letters to Vita Saxville West, or here's another selfish invalid's bulletin, which is how I feel staring at a black and white photograph of an Arctic wolf. Though it is not the greatest of compositions, too much is faded, unclear. It arrests every part of me. The bare, depressing winter trees against the bloomed gray-white sky suit me. The wolf's foot pads in the snow disappear into haggard whiteness. From a removed righteous vantage point as viewer, I realize we're meant to be the photographer, and I assume the wolf is female because she looks right at me from her confine of light and chemicals on paper, some part of her soul burned onto it like a nuclear shadow, and that is how women look when seen suddenly from the wilds of their private, difficult life. This poem is called The Infant's Eyes, and it's about that bizarre thing that happens when you have a child and then all of a sudden they're obsessed with you and they look at you. And it's like one just isn't used to being looked at in the eye very often. And so Irina wrote a whole poem about it. That's how intense it is. So, The Infant's Eyes. Now that I too am the terrible witness to the ovum, and I have been wrestled to the ground with her fresh bread and dirt breath, and have been the laughing maniac of motherhood, Now I will always go, rise to see what is wrong, like a cardinal to the Pope. Whenever something sounds from upstairs, I'll rush up or out or in to see what is what, whether anyone is hurt or in need, and I will putter back to continue the leftover saggy and unreal job of aging towards benediction. Now, when I bite into the tied off end of a sausage, it reminds me of her umbilical cord, as the eyes of the mice in my kitchen remind me of her eyes, and the unclearness of the birthing room. When the mice watch me storming about, slamming dishes, it reminds me how her infant eyes began to follow me when I paced the little horrible apartment we were living in when she was born, an apartment that reeked in the hallway of cigarettes, and the neighbor was always screaming at her boyfriend that he was making her fat because he didn't love her enough, and he would hang out of his window smoking a bowl saying, "Jesus fucking Christ," and shaking his head. And those were the days when my baby began following me with her eyes, when I, neurotic about her breathing, noticed her noticing me. And I realized I'd never been looked at like that before, as if the sky had ripped off a strip of its blue and a massive face looked through at me. I froze under her dispassionate infant stare, her twin black crystal balls fully focusing on me, surveying like an ancient god the status of evolution's latest results, making what could only be her Edenic judgments. Well, so here's a shout out to COVID. It's not even true. That's not even what this is, but and yet it is at the same time. It's called The Way Things Were Up Until Now. Just because so much got shook up, I mean, obviously, but it's sort of like good to shake it up. I mean, may it never end. May we always be changing and dealing with it. There's nothing we can do but do that. I'm bored of all the excuses. Bored as Mayakovsky at the Finnish painters exhibition, barking like a dog through the foreign minister's toast until he cried and sat down. Deadly serious. I'm bored as an elegy. I mean, why care at all, speaking as a pitfall in a world of pits, but we do, to the death. We all agree to garden this year. And my raspberry bushes picked over by wrens, I'll make them great again and let America go wild. It'll be all trumpets and leeks and lilacs from here on out. Let's stop paying for it. Get it free. Let's plant our victory gardens to supplement grief, boost morale, as though something new and uncontrolled were available. It is the original, new, hot, future joy, and we're making it out of dough. And the illusion of separateness, let it go back into remission. Just look at you. You look like a resurrected child. A serious drama and a cosmic joke. Scarred, masked, dangerous. And what of the new Eucharist? How hungry I am, how I long to lack. Though in Walmart, my heart beats a little faster. And I want the world to heal up. And the world is a field, as if it were indeed flat, curving and caving, as if it were a piece of paper, a Gustave Doré engraving from the Divina Commedia, the one with the silhouettes of Dante and Beatrice standing in front of the blinding, exploding white rose that you realize when looking more closely is all made up of bodies and wings twisted together. The saintly throng, they call it, mashed and hurtling, an image of heaven and the creation of angels, though it is frenzied as any image of hell around a divine nipple. Odin's lost eye in the well, the drain to the other side, joy that gets more frantic the more you try to quiet it down. Once Mark Leidner talked me into doing set design unpaid in the Poconos, where I would be forever traumatized by the overpopulation of deer, growths on their bodies and bald patches, limping and scarred from being hit by cars, and the one the crew called Jawbone that kept coming around because its jawbone was hanging off its head unusable while the body wasted away. And I brought it out mashed potatoes, and it lapped it up with a long tongue. We had to fire the creepy sound guy who was clearly on drugs, and I found a big plastic gallon of Dewars in the Airbnb cupboard and a guitar, and got drunk alone on the deck of the cabin, amazed no one would join me. I woke in the middle of the night from my usual routine of self-hatred until I realized how excruciating it all was, and instead wrote down on the set schedule, remember how good it feels to be good to yourself. Carrying it around with me ever since, hoping I will. Tragic nature. Your 3-year-old has found you sitting in the kitchen. You can hardly speak when you are like this. She pauses, asks why you are sad, climbs onto the counter and begins siphoning something into the corner of your mouth with a plastic play syringe. Lemonade, it turns out. The sugar enters you like naloxone. She is the one alive, holding up. Now the huge cowbird, your illness, a ravenous changeling in the sparrow's nest, stirs uneasily. You, the sow who eats her piglets because she is tired of the whole succession of things, grubbing in their invincible soft skin, glass eyes, and fresh breath. It is hard for mothers to be like this. It is hard for mothers to be sick like this. Across the field, frogs have climbed out onto the pond and onto Route 7 in an evening rainstorm, and the pavement steams. The frog silhouettes fling left and right like a child's wall decal into the evening traffic. Long stream of twin, bright spotlights. Their lives are brief. The road the next day is littered with them. The smashed, twisted bodies of young frogs. I'm just gonna end here on in absence this unknowing. And thanks so much for coming to this live reading, which is the first live reading I've given with the book, so it's very special. Thank you, Ralph, so much, and James for inviting me. In absence this unknowing. When you leave, faceless old lover, element I have tried for so long to explain, I will be suspended between 2 large stones for a moment, thinking you were good before I am revived. I will be laundry that has gotten loose from the clothesline, pantyhose flying into traffic. So long, handsome. When you go, I will be the moth, the butterfly, turned to broth in the cocoon. Reassembled, I will climb out, and you will be subsumed into a majesty of vapor, gone as an orchid I plan it, little switchblade. I will it, strand of sweet spittle, endearing idiot I made out of mud and loss. You, whose shelf life is zero. You, who keep me from totality and the small sum of what is otherwise infinite. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the beautiful reading. We have time for a couple of questions if the poets. Question.
Is she still over there?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess so, sure.
Hi, can I ask a question? Can you guys hear me?
Go for it.
I just did a meme about this where it was Quentin Tarantino just staring at the wall and looking depressed. My process, like writing poems, I've been writing my whole life. So, it's evolved, I guess, but for me, it's like I always am somehow engaging in poetry, even if I'm not like in a writing mode. I'm always reading poetry or like seeking it out, or reading about poetry. And for me, that's really important in getting the voice going in my head. And I try and write, when I had Odette, I didn't really write any poetry for like a year. I mean, that happens. But I try and write, every week something, and I journal and just being active in the mind, keeping poetry there. But like working on a book, it's a lot of going through old drafts, and that always stimulates new poetry for me. So editing, it's always about like kind of like opening your folder and being like, oh yeah, I forgot I wrote that poem, and working on it, and or you're like, this is terrible, and throwing it away, and writing new poems. Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed is that for me, the process has changed a lot from my youth to today. When I was in my teens and 20s and even my 30s, I just felt like, when is like somebody's got to hit me up the side of the head with a frying pan or something like that to get like I've got to be really happy or really furious or some kind of, in some kind of extremity of emotion or something like that to be able to sit down and write. And what I've learned as I've gotten older is just sit down and write. Don't wait for something to come. And something that I've done in the last couple of years that has been really valuable was that I joined an online group where you have a commitment to write something every day, even if it's just a couple of words. And you have a group of people with whom you share whatever it is that you write. And there's no critical back and forth. There isn't any of that kind of, shit at all. It's just, you have a group of people that you're responsible to. They in turn are responsible to you. You write something every day, you share it with them. They write something every day and share it with you. And, I fail in that process sometimes, but one of the things that I've noticed is that it's, that anything can come out of that. And sitting down and just doing it is incredibly, incredibly important. I don't feel like I did in my younger days when I've got to, somebody's got to sort of sneak up behind me and smack me.
Yeah, I have an email thread with a close friend that's similar, where we just send each other poems. We try to do it every day, but having like one person do that with their words, not about critique, you know, it's just about, oh, I love that poem.
Right.
What makes me want to write a poem? I'm jealous, you know. I just did it this morning. I just wrote a poem, sent it to her, didn't even read it.
Mhm.
That's how much I trust her. You know, I'm like, I don't care. I can send her bad poems.
We have a question from the Zoom audience, and they ask who your favorite poets with a sense of absurd/humor are.
James Tate is
Yes,
one of the
wonderful.
best. Yeah.
Bob Hickok, I like very much in that respect. Thomas Lex, bless his heart, who is no longer with us and was taken far too soon, is somebody else I think of.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a woman that's absurd. I think Bernadette Mayer has some great
Mhm.
absurdity to her writing. She's so wonderful. I love the absurd. I feel like it's crucial. I mean, it's in a lot of people's poetry, but some people utilize it more than others.
Yeah.
But I think Tate's at the top.
Who's the last book that made you jealous?
Oh, I read Mark Leidner, like totally brat on each other, but I loved his last book. That's just off the top of my head. You're like, nobody makes me jealous.
I
And I'm
know,
like,
no.
I'm like, top.
Well, it's not, I don't know, jealousy is, I sort of feel like I just want to go, nice job, you know. I've read a lot of Joan Elshire's latest book is wonderful. I've got some Vermont poets in my head right now. I think Louise Glick's new book is wonderful. There's a couple of names.
We're not really gonna tell you who made us jealous. That's private.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Let's give the poets another round of applause.
Thank you.
There's some books for sale. The poets will be signing books. And thank you so much for coming. Our next event is next Friday with Rajiv Lohier and Chen here at 7 p.m. Everyone can move your seats against the wall.
And thank you so much, folks, for braving this very dicey weather to come out. It's great.
Hi, can I ask Bianca a question?
Oh, sure.
Hi, Bianca, can you hear me?
One of the
Well, the first live one, yeah.
Oops.
Let me get my COVID on here.
No, don't sneeze on me.
Hold your breath.
All right, great. So good. You were really, I was wonderful.
Exactly the same. I just adored your poem. Really was.
Oh, I'm so glad because I have admired you for a long time.
Oh, that's awesome. I know that.
Well,
I needed what
we made a long trek to be here.